I wasn't expecting a celebration. Not after 18 years. But I also wasn't expecting a 17% pay cut in an email. Timestamped 8:15 a.m. Subject line, compensation adjustment. No meeting, no heads up, no thank you for nearly 2 decades of silence, cleanup and loyalty. Just numbers. Brutal calculated numbers. My name is Tesseline Corin. I've been the Director of Operational Ethics at Glenrock Systems for nearly 2 decades. I'm the one they called at 2 in the morning when a compliance report risked federal penalties. I'm the one who redlined every contract, flagged every risk, and whispered corrections before PR disasters could happen. I never asked for much. No flashy title, no private office, no social media profile. I believed in being the spine of the company, invisible but essential. Yesterday, literally yesterday, my division head patted my shoulder in the elevator and said, "No one protects this place like you do, Tess." And today, that same division head CC'd me on a mass HR memo. The attached spreadsheet listed every adjustment. My name was in red. Beside it, 17% effective immediately. 2 rows down, Caden Miller, the analyst I mentored last year, got a promotion and an 11% raise. I reread the file 3 times, thinking maybe I missed a footnote. Maybe this was a reallocation, a temporary shift, a clerical mistake, but it wasn't. I sat at my desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I thought about replying. I thought about asking why. I even drafted a line. Can we clarify the rationale behind the salary change? But I didn't send it because, in that moment, something inside me shifted. It wasn't the number that hurt. It was the message behind it. You don't matter anymore. They didn't just cut my salary. They sliced into the idea that loyalty, consistency, and quiet excellence would ever be enough in this place again. So, I closed the spreadsheet. I didn't complain. I didn't schedule a meeting. But I felt something settle low and heavy in the pit of my chest. The kind of silence that doesn't come from shock. The kind that comes before a decision. The next morning, I walked into Glenrock's marble-floored lobby with the same poise I'd worn for 18 years. 7:30 a.m., right on time. My blouse was tucked, hair smooth, and I even placed a box of blueberry muffins at the front desk, just like I always did on Mondays. Routine is a language. It tells people, I'm fine. Nothing's wrong. And I knew they'd believe it. That's the comfort of being invisible until needed. No one looks closely when you stop speaking. But inside, something had turned. I bypassed the main floor and headed straight to my office, nodding politely at a junior associate who offered a sheepish good morning. I didn't stop, didn't smile. My badge beeped softly as I unlocked the door, then locked it behind me. I didn't open my email. I didn't check the calendar. Instead, I inserted a drive into my laptop, flat, black, and unmarked. It asked for a 16-digit key and a retinal scan. Both accepted. The screen went dark for a beat, then lit up in a palette of grayscale and blue. Echo Mirror had just awakened. 5 years ago, Glenrock had faced a crisis. A government ethics investigation that nearly severed our most lucrative federal contract. I was brought in to salvage it, not just with policy memos or apology tours, but with architecture, a system that could detect risk before it exploded. I built Echo Mirror as an internal behavior scanner. It watched who approved what, how quickly decisions were made, when documentation didn't match. And most importantly, why patterns emerged where they shouldn't. When the storm passed, the board called it overkill, too invasive, too risky. They said, but they didn't ask me to delete it. They just stopped funding updates. And so I buried it deep within Glenrock Systems. I maintained a ghost instance, firewalled, unreachable by any interface but mine. It hadn't been opened since the week I archived it until now. As the dashboard came to life, I watched a familiar stream of names, timestamps, and internal flags bloom across the screen. Echo Mirror hadn't just survived. It had evolved without intervention. It had continued to track anomalies in executive access, non-compliant approvals, altered timestamps, even flagged shifts in passive-aggressive tone during meeting transcripts. My face remained blank. My heart didn't race. Feigned calm had become muscle memory. I scrolled through the feed, seeing names I recognized. Many I didn't. Some flagged for duplicate reimbursements, some for invisible consulting vendors. One executive had approved a conflict of interest waiver with no second signatory. Then, out of curiosity or something deeper, I clicked on the search bar and typed Tesseline Corin. The screen blinked, a small wheel spun. Then no entries found. I checked the filters. Time frame full span. Categories, all sensitivity max. Still nothing. In 5,000 working days, I hadn't triggered even a yellow flag. I leaned back slowly, letting the silence fill the room. The screen glowed softly in the dark. Echo Mirror had judged everyone, even the developers, the assistants, the temp workers, but not me, and yet, I was the one they decided to cut. The bitterness wasn't loud. It was clean, sharp, still, like standing beside a window during a snowstorm, watching the cold, but not feeling it. I hadn't failed them. They had failed themselves. And now they'd forgotten this mirror ever existed. I looked around the office, my name still on the glass, my certificates still framed, my shelves still holding binders I built from nothing. But now they felt distant, like souvenirs from a past that no longer claimed me. So I created a new folder, labeled it Ghost, Mirror Backup 01, and dragged the entire contents of the system into it. If I was invisible to them now, I might as well become their ghost. And ghosts, they remember everything. The system remembered everything. That was the part that haunted me. Even when they'd archived it, stripped the funding, and claimed Echo Mirror was no longer in use. I'd known better. I hadn't just designed it. I had quietly protected it, maintained it, trusted it. But now, staring at my name in the search bar with no records to be found, I wondered if the memory it held went even deeper than I realized. If the system never forgets, what else has it been forced to bury? I leaned forward and opened the archive index. The one most people had never known existed. Buried beneath layers of internal changelogs and compliance updates was a string of misnamed system folders. File paths that didn't align with any modern naming convention. One folder stood out. Legacy Build Voss, V13. Garrett, Voss, or, as we knew him, Blaine, the founder. The last CEO who ever asked me why I cared so much about ethics. 5 years ago, Garrett Blaine had stood with me in the glass-walled observatory on the 10th floor. We were reviewing Echo Mirror's early test logs when he said something I never forgot. This system will outlive both of us. Tess, the question is, will it still serve truth or just power? Back then, I thought he was being dramatic. He always had a poetic way of saying hard things. Garrett was the kind of leader who asked questions that slowed down meetings. Questions about culture, sustainability, and human cost. He was the reason Echo Mirror ever saw daylight. When the board pressured us to roll out something flashier, less invasive, more market-friendly, he refused. And then quietly, suddenly, he was gone. No press release, no scandal, just a 3-line email announcing his retirement. I never believed it. Opening the folder, I found a series of encrypted logs. One file was different. It was large audio. Its last modification date, 3 days before Garrett's exit. I decrypted it using a private key Garrett had given me, just in case, his voice from the past echoing as I entered the code. Then the recording began. 4 voices, a meeting behind closed doors, familiar names. Now high-ranking executives speaking in clipped transactional tones. He won't budge on the layoffs. We spin it as early retirement. He walks with dignity. The system's too powerful in his hands. Then we cut him before he uses it on us. And then a voice that chilled me. The current CEO back then. He was VP of Strategy. Blaine built a mirror. Let's make sure he doesn't have time to look into it. The room went quiet. So did I. I replayed the last 10 seconds 3 times, just to be sure I hadn't imagined it. But the words were real, immortalized in a forgotten corner of a system they thought was dead. I remembered that week Garrett hadn't said goodbye to me. Just left a notebook in my office drawer and a yellow sticky note. Keep your eyes open. They won't see you coming. At the time, I'd thought it meant them. But what if it meant others like me? A million questions swirled. But one truth cut through. I wasn't alone. I wasn't alone. The weight of that truth settled over me like a shadow stretching across the floor. I closed the archive folder and tapped a new directory into existence, Rot Layer 1. There, I placed the Sedona retreat evidence, the backdated Q3 report, the padded crane contract, and the audio file implicating the board's inner circle. Each item lived in its own subfolder, labeled and timestamped. No flourish. No flourish, just clarity. I double-checked my tracer code embedded in the board confession raw move file. A light beacon that would ping me if anyone, anywhere, dared open it. Then I packed my laptop and drove home. The Neon city lights dissolving into my rearview mirror. At home, I locked the front door behind me and sank onto the couch, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. I wasn't broken. I was awake. Morning arrived with the same ritual precision. Black slacks, crisp white blouse, hair drawn back in a no-nonsense bun. I arrived at exact shift time, idling in the lobby with a reusable coffee cup in hand. Nobody noticed the way my eyes skimmed tiles and cameras for blind spots. Nobody asked why I carried 2 phones today at 8:02 a.m. I slipped into my office, heart lodged low but steady. The unused echo mirror interface flickered across my screen. I launched the search bar and typed in Leila Monroe. This time, the system yielded dozens of entries. Warnings filed, reprimands logged, suppression trails that ended in her termination. I opened each and exported them into a new folder. Mirror of the Young. Then I drafted a termination review request email addressed to HR, the Ethics Committee, and the Legal Department, carbon copied to every compliance officer in the chain. Subject line, request for immediate ethics review. Leila Monroe. I pressed save as draft. No send. Not yet. I turned back to Echo Mirror and watched flags cascade across the Executive Behavior tab. I scrolled until my finger hovered over one that still churned something visceral deep inside me. A mid-level manager with a spotless record flagged for travel expense fraud. I clicked into the GPS logs and photo evidence of a Caribbean getaway filed under client entertainment. And then I paused. I had the power to expose hundreds. I had the evidence. But who would listen? I minimized the window and opened a blank spreadsheet. I began mapping connections, Crane and partners to the board, Sedona invoices to VP-level execs, backdated financials to investor reports. Each line I drew across cells felt like drawing a line in the sand. My second phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop now, Tess. No further explanation. I stared at the message with deliberate calm, thumb hovering over delete. But I didn't delete it. Instead, I typed back, prove you're real. I hit send, and waited. Minutes passed. My draft email to HR and compliance beckoned in the foreground. My tracer file sat silently in rot layer 1. Echo Mirror waited behind everything, patient and impartial. Then the reply came. You're not the only one. No signature, no context, just those 4 words. And suddenly, I understood that Ghost, who had reached out, didn't just want to stop me. They wanted to ally. I took a breath and hit send on my draft. The email launched into the company's legal servers. A beacon of truth fired into a system that had systematically silenced dissent. Moments later, my inbox pulsed again. HR's read receipt. Compliance's acknowledgement. Legal's automated. Boilerplate and buried among them. One response that made my chest tighten. From an internal counsel I'd trusted once. Subject line. We need to talk. 10 a.m., room 11B. I closed Echo Mirror, packed my bag, and walked toward the conference corridor with all the poise I'd worn for 18 years. Only this time, I carried more than muffins and routine. I carried a reckoning. As I approached room 11B, my foot hovered at the threshold, a door between silence and storm. I stepped through. The room was empty but for a single folder on the table. I opened it, a dossier of my own missteps, Leila's case, my signature on documents I'd barely glanced at, warnings I'd ignored. A voice at the door made me freeze. You're asking for help, Tess. The counsel entered, eyes grave. He didn't apologize. He just placed a manila envelope next to my dossier. This is everything we pulled. You're not alone. I nodded once, letting the gravity of 4 words "you're not alone" anchor me. The folder's flap whispered as I closed it. Outside, the world carried on, blind to the mirror that had finally begun to reflect the truth. I exhaled, steady and certain. The next act was about to begin. I lifted the manila envelope, the weight of its contents pressing against my palm. The counsel watched me without expression, arms crossed. I opened the flap and pulled out a series of USB drives, printed logs, and a single sheet with a time and place. Midnight, Industrial Park Lot 12. This is where they're moving the data backups, he said quietly. If we want to control the narrative, we hit it first. I glanced at the drive's encrypted clones of Rot Layer 1, Mirror of the Young, and every other folder I'd built in Echo Mirror. My throat tightened. These weren't just files. They were bullets in a war no one knew they were fighting. I understand, I said. I'll be there. The sun had set hours ago when I parked. Outside the deserted warehouse, a chill wind stole through the chain-link fence. My second phone buzzed. We'll be watching. Hours are ticking. No name, no number. The ghost ally was real. I slipped on gloves, tucked the drives into my coat, and approached the side door. A motion sensor flickered. A camera pivoted. I took a breath, stepped into its view, and let Echo Mirror do the rest. Within seconds, its ghost instance rerouted a looped feed showing static and disabled the sensor's alert. The door clicked open. Inside, under a cluster of halogen lamps, rows of servers hummed. Backup tapes and hard drives lay stacked like bricks, no guards. I moved quickly, opening a control terminal, my retinal scan granting me access. A console glowed with file transfers scheduled for upload to an offshore server. I plugged in the first USB drive. The system recognized it. A prompt, load data, YN. I typed Y, watched the progress bar flood across the screen. As each folder transferred, I whispered to the servers, remember these names, remember this truth. 30 minutes later, the ghost drives contained every trace of Echo Mirror's evidence. I ejected the final stick and stepped back. A faint alarm wind, then drowned under the looped feed. But I knew it had alerted somebody. I backed out the way I came. As I reached the fence, headlights swept across the lot. I sprinted into the shadows, heart pounding, until I merged into the night. My phone buzzed. Well done. Next, extraction. Back in my apartment, I laid out the drives on the kitchen table. My reflection in the window looked tired but resolute. I plugged the drives into a burner laptop not mine and began uploading the evidence. To secure cloud accounts linked to journalists, regulatory bodies, and federal investigators, each upload sent a digital breadcrumb trail that bypassed corporate firewalls and legal desk drawers. At 2:17 a.m., I sent a final message via a secure channel. It's live. Then I deleted every trace of my IP. I sat back, watching status bars fill, each one a promise of accountability. The morning headlines hit like a shockwave. Glenrock Systems under federal investigation. Whistleblower releases internal surveillance and fraud evidence. Ethics director's anonymous leak topples boardroom dynasty. Echo Mirror exposed how a hidden AI system uncovered corporate corruption. My phone buzzed again, this time with more familiar tones. Leila Monroe's number. I answered. Tess, she said, voice shaky. I saw. You did it. I closed my eyes. I did it for you. Thank you, she whispered. I'm sorry. For everything. No apologies, I said. You deserve justice. By midday, Glenrock's lobby was a media circus. Reporters shoved cameras through glass doors. Security guards herded employees onto buses. I watched from across the street, who'd pulled low, never staying long enough for them to recognize me. The board had resigned. The CEO's office was vacated. Federal agents had sealed off the 10th floor. I walked past the muffins I'd once delivered with such care. They sat untouched on the reception counter. I thought about collecting them, about the absurdity of blueberry muffins versus corporate avarice. But kept moving. Over the next week, good people began to surface. Analysts reinstated, contracts reviewed, backdated reports rescinded. An interim ethics committee formed with Leila and another former Glenrock staffer at its helm. Investors held emergency calls. Regulators opened inquiries into behavioral surveillance software policies. Echo Mirror's code, once a ghost, became the basis for new transparency standards. One night, I met Garrett Blaine at a small cafe, 4 blocks from Glenrock. He slid into the booth across from me, black coffee in hand. He looked older still, but the spark was back in his eyes. You did more than I ever dreamed, he said. I protected something, I replied, and it protected more people than I could. He nodded. We built a mirror for power. You've turned it into a mirror for truth. I offered a small, tired smile. Truth needs a voice. He reached into his jacket and placed a slim notebook on the table. I kept this for you. I opened it, handwritten notes from our earliest brainstorming sessions. Moral axioms scrawled in his careful script. I think it's time we finish what we started, he said. In the weeks that followed, Garrett and I formed a nonprofit consortium dedicated to ethical AI and corporate accountability. Echo Mirror's source code was open-sourced under strict use licenses. The kill key clause remained intact, enforced by an independent board. Training programs launched to help companies implement transparent behavior monitoring systems, with employee consent and oversight. I spoke at conferences quietly at first about the perils of silence and the imperative of speaking up. My name was no longer read in a cold spreadsheet. It was written across keynote banners. I still went by Tesseline Corin, though now I wore no badge. I carried no muffins. But every Monday, I baked blueberry muffins for our small team in homage to the routine that once tried to silence me. One late afternoon, as I locked up the consortium's new offices, a renovated warehouse in a repurposed Arts District, I felt a familiar tap on my shoulder. I turned to see Leela, now head of investigations, holding a box of muffins. "Tess, we have a meeting in 5. Can I give you one?" I took a muffin and bit into it. Sweet, warm, and entirely mundane. "Thanks," I said. She smiled. For the record, your loyalty always mattered. I closed my eyes, savoring the taste. The mirror had finally spoken, and, in its reflection, we saw each other. And I knew silence would never be an option again.